Preparing for winter. G'day my lovelies and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you haven't been here before. I'm Kathy and this is where I talk about my plants and all my other pet hobbies. Today I wanted to talk about preparing my plants for winter, what I do differently during the colder season for my plants indoors, which seems really odd to be talking about winter when we are having a 24 degrees Celsius day in Melbourne on the 30th of April. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. Normally April is very cold and we certainly don't have 24 degrees days. And yet, here we are. Who says climate change isn't a thing? Oh, maybe our Prime Minister, because he's an idiot. Maybe I shouldn't throw that in. I don't know, but I feel very strongly about it and I am quite ashamed of our government for not doing more in relation to climate change. But that is beside the point. Okay, first off, I need to point out that I live in Melbourne, Australia. We are in the southern hemisphere, so our seasons are different, obviously, to those who live in the northern hemisphere. We do not get below zero very often. We do not get snow. We feel it is really cold, but I think compared to other countries, our climate is probably considered temperate to cool. So I think our climate is quite different to certain other countries and everyone's home is different. My home, for example, is extremely well insulated because it's a new home, but I do not leave the heaters on at night. I switch them off so it can get quite chilly inside. Other people leave their heaters on all the time. I think again it will depend upon where you live and it will depend upon the individual, but that is my home conditions. It can get, I think, to 12 degrees, maybe a little bit lower. Actually, probably a lot lower. I haven't actually kept track of it, but it can get really cold in the mornings when I wake up. And of course, my plants have to live in those conditions. So whatever advice I do give you today, you will need to keep in mind what my home conditions are and where I live in the world, because they all play a part as to how much our plants suffer perhaps in winter. There are different things that you need to keep in mind with your plants in winter. The first thing is the amount of light that they get. As we get into the middle of winter, we have shorter and shorter days, and therefore our plants are getting a lot less light. And plants that might have been able to cope, say, fairly back from a window, may suffer because they're not getting as much light as they would in the warmer seasons. So you might need to move your plants closer to windows so they can get more light. Now, if you do not have enough window space or room to put your plants close to windows, then you can always invest in grow lights. I personally don't have any. I am considering getting some, but I haven't got any at this point, so I can't really tell you what my experience is with grow lights. But from what I have seen online, say on other YouTubers' channels, is grow lights have really helped their plants survive shorter days in winter, as well as give them more light, which they otherwise would not be able to get through natural light. So that is also an option. But if you're not interested in adding grow lights, if you can crowd your plants closer to light sources from your windows, the better they will do, because they will get more light in winter than they otherwise would. The second thing I wanted to talk about was cold, particularly in relation to windows. Obviously, if our plants are sitting on a windowsill or say touching the glass, they might get more cold because of it. and you might need to pull them back a little so that they are not going to be affected by the cold of the glass. That is very important for certain plants. Other plants don't seem to care, but some may be sensitive to that kind of cold. Now, if like me, you turn off your heaters at night and you find that your plants are suffering, you might have to consider putting them, say, in a closed room and keeping the heat up in that room, or you can use heat mats, or you can put them, say, in a cupboard, a glass cabinet obviously, or somewhere where they are more protected than if they are just left out in the open in your home. I have been considering whether to get a heat mat for my Dieffenbachias because they certainly don't like the cold, but I haven't decided yet if I'm going to invest in that. Another option is not to have plants that are more susceptible to cold. However, if what we have in our homes are tropical plants, then they are going to suffer from the cold because they're not used to it. They are used to much warmer conditions than we normally have in our homes. Or definitely more warm than they are in my home. So you might want to consider whether it is appropriate, say, to have a plant that is going to suffer from cold in your house. Obviously, it is not to the same level that they would suffer if they were outside, but it is something to keep in mind. Another thing is drafts. I know, for example, that aglaonemas do not like drafts. So if your plants that are sensitive to cold are close to, say, doors that open and close often, you might want to consider repositioning them somewhere else. And flowing on from that is heating. We generally do run our heaters in winter. Well, I know I have to anyway, and I have to keep an eye on the plants that are opposite these heaters because generally speaking, most plants don't like the hot air that blows from my heaters. For example, where I'm filming now is next to my TV cabinet. I have quite a few plants here, and directly opposite is my split system air conditioner, which blows hot air directly at these plants. If I see that they are not doing well because of the hot air, then I'm going to have to move them. So you will need to keep in mind how you heat your home and whether your plants are near heat vents, for example. The same applies with air conditioning in summer. Your plants are not going to like either being blown directly at them because it does dry them out. The next thing I wanted to talk about is humidity. I know for a fact that the humidity levels in my home drop substantially during winter because I am running the heaters. Normally, my home gets to 45% humidity levels and upwards when the heaters are not on. Some of our plants do require higher humidity, and there are several ways that you can do that. The best way, I think, is to have a humidifier, which you fill up with water, you set it up next to the plants that require high humidity, and you run it pretty much every day. I did so last year because I had a few humidity hose. Most of them were calatheas, so I ran a humidifier right next to them. I think it was 6 hours every day until the humidity levels in my home started rising again, and then I took off the humidifier. All of my plants seemed to do okay. I can't say they looked extremely happy, but hey, it was winter. I thought it's not the lack of humidity, it's simply that they're not as happy in winter as they are when they're growing in spring and summer. The only plant that I did lose was a Calathea medallion. Other than that, it seemed that most of them coped quite well having the humidifier running next to them. The rest of my plants, I did not give them extra humidity. They did fine in my home without it. Now, if you don't want to invest in a humidifier, what you can do is put little glasses of water close by those plants that need more humidity. The water will evaporate and raise the humidity levels. Another way to increase humidity is to put your plants all in the one room or very close together, group them together, because then they develop their own microclimate. It does help to raise some of the humidity, but it will not raise it substantially. And you might find that you still do have issues with lack of humidity, particularly with plants like calatheas, which do require high humidity. Now, another option some people use is misting their plants. All the reading I have done suggests that that is completely ineffective to raise humidity. It might raise it for a few minutes and that is all. So I don't recommend that, particularly as plants in winter do not like to have a lot of water on their leaves or in the soil, as it can lead to other issues like powdery mildew or even root rot. Other people are using glass cabinets to store all their plants. That's another option. You can use a glass cabinet, put all your plants in there. You just need to ensure that they have sufficient airflow. Another option is using, say, big glass jars. You can put a plant that requires a lot of humidity in one of those and then close the lid. I personally haven't found that method successful, but that is not to say it can't work for certain plants. I just know that it did not work with my Alocasia beginda dragon scale. Anyway, you can also use a pebble tray, where you have a tray full of pebbles and you put water on top of that. Then you can set, say, the plants that require higher humidity on top of those pebbles. Just make sure that the bottom of the pot does not sit directly in the water, as that can cause other issues with your plants. I haven't found that as effective as the humidifier was. And I should mention that I didn't find my electricity bill went up even noticeably because I was running a humidifier. I think I paid around $70 for this humidifier, and it has worked out very well for me. And because we have very good water in Melbourne, I didn't find that it had mineral buildup either. And honestly, I didn't clean it until the end of the season when I decided to put the humidifier away. So that is also something to keep in mind, that in Melbourne it seems our water is quite pure, so it doesn't cause some issues that others may face in other countries or in other cities. I know there is a debate on this as to whether you should or shouldn't fertilize your plants in winter. I think it really does depend on your home conditions. In my home, because I switch off all my heaters at night and the temperature does not remain constant, I find my plants don't grow very much in winter. So I definitely do not fertilize them. However, if you have grow lights, if the temperature in your home remains constant 24 hours a day, you might find that your plants do grow. And if they do, then I think you can fertilize them. But I prefer to err on the side of caution, so I definitely do not fertilize in winter. What I do, however, is give my plants slow release fertilizer at the beginning of autumn, 1st of March in Australia. And that normally lasts, I think, between 5 to 6 months. So if my plants do require some fertilizer, there is some in the soil. It is probably running out towards the end of winter, but that's fine because I re-fertilize in spring. I do, however, give all my plants sea salt, which is a seaweed extract. I spray the foliage and I spray the soil. It is a vitamin pick-me-up. It also helps my plants combat pests. So I make sure I give them that at least once a month. This is Editing Kathy. I forgot to mention pests, because nobody wants to think about pests, especially during winter when we have other issues we have to think about. However, plants that are under stress, for whatever reason, are more prone to pests, which is why it is important to keep an eye out for pests. Check over your plants at least once every fortnight, if not every week. If you actually do find pests, then of course you will need to deal with it according to the pests that you have found. The other issue is fungus gnats. I know that happens a lot, particularly in winter. Fungus gnats generally like wet soil or moist soil, and because the soil takes a lot longer to dry in winter, that's generally when you will find you might have a problem with fungus gnats. I had a major problem with fungus gnats the first year I had plants, and what worked for me was having little bowls of apple cider vinegar mixed with water and a little bit of dish soap. The fungus gnat adults are attracted to it and then they drown in it, which is good. I have no sympathy for fungus gnats. However, that doesn't get rid of the larva or the eggs that might be in the soil. You have to treat that in other ways. There are quite a few videos out there in relation to treating fungus gnats. If people are interested, I'm happy to do a video on what worked for me. But as I said earlier, keep an eye out for pests. The sooner you catch a problem with pests, the easier it will be to deal with them. If you leave it too late, it can be much harder to get rid of pests. The next thing I wanted to talk about is water. Now this is where a lot of people get unstuck, including me. In my first winter, I definitely killed quite a few plants by overwatering. In winter, you will notice that your plants require a lot less water than they do in any other time of year. And they stay wet a lot longer. So you do need to keep an eye out on your watering, because it will be very easy to overwater your plants, which could lead to them getting root rot and dying. I definitely recommend that you use a moisture meter and check your plants. And do not be surprised if some plants, like a Zanzibar gem or snake plants, can go 2, even 3 months without a watering. They can. It really will depend on the size of the pot and how much light they're getting, and your home conditions. So like any other time of year, I recommend that you check every plant before you water it. And if they're wet, don't water them. Even if you're used to watering them, say, every week, no, don't water them in winter. They seriously will not need half as much water as they do when they're actively growing or in spring and summer. So if you take nothing else away from this video, make sure that you do not overwater your plants. Check them thoroughly and make sure that they need water before you give it to them. It is the easiest way to kill your plants, especially in winter, is by overwatering them. And for all those new plant owners who are going through their first winter, can I just say, don't panic. Seriously, I'm going to take it from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't panic. Your plants will survive. You will survive. You might have some fatalities, but don't take that as an indication that you're a bad plant parent. No, it happens to everyone. Winter can be hard on our plants. It can also be hard on us. So don't beat yourself up if you find some of your plants suffer in winter. The way I see it, we all do. All of us just want to have nice weather and not have to worry about some of these issues. And let me stress once more that all of these tips are dependent upon where you live, what your home conditions are, and what your climate is. Some of them may not apply to you, some may apply more than others. Well, that is all the tips that I have for you today. I'm sure I've left some out, and I would love it if you guys told me what other things you do to prepare your plants for winter. And you can put it down in the comments, or you can contact me on Instagram. It might be something that I will find useful or that others do. Well, thank you all very much for hanging out with me. I really do hope you found this video useful. And if you did, you can do the usual thing. You can like, comment, or subscribe. I hope you all have a beautiful day and a beautiful weekend, and I will see you next time. Bye. Okay, fine. Where's my alocasia? Blech!